Okay, this is a little review of Ohm's law for our starter. Voltage, we use AV. Now, what units are voltage measured in? It's volts, yes, very good. Volts. Now, what is the abbreviation for volts? Capital V. This is one of the few things where the variable and the units are the same letter. And what's the breakdown for it? What is a volt equal to?
V equals I times R.
Well, that's the formula. I'm talking about the unit here. A volt is a joule per coulomb. That is how much energy is in a coulomb of charge as it's moving through the circuit. I expect you to know this for the quiz, which will be tomorrow. Okay, current. Current, we use the letter I. I don't know why we use I. That's kind of, yeah. But I don't know, they use capital C for something else. Then we use, they're measured with amps or amperes if you really want to get technical, but everybody just calls them amps. And we use a capital A. Now, what is an amp? An amp is a measure of how much charge goes by every second. So that's coulombs per second. Okay, so that's the breakdown for it. And then resistance, R. So that's pretty logical. The units for resistance are ohms. And we don't use a capital O because that would be confusing. So we use that horseshoe thing called an omega. And really what an ohm tells you is how many volts you need to get an amp of current to flow through something. How hard it is to make current flow through it. It's also a measure of how much energy you get. Well, we'll talk about that later. But this is the way to think. This will be on the quiz tomorrow. Number 2. Well, when you go around a circuit, if you start off, and sometimes you'll see this symbol, and actually I haven't done this before where I show you this symbol, but you'll see that in schematics sometimes. That means, hey, everything down here is at 0 volts. It's been grounded. And in real circuits, like in houses or something, you literally have a spike that's shoved into the ground, and that's why they call it being grounded. But in other words, everything here is at 0 energy. Then if you go through a battery of cells, bam, you've got 12 volts, 12 joules of energy per coulomb of charge. And everything's at 12 volts. Everything is at 12 volts. And then, but now you're going to go through a resistor. You drop down 3 volts, so that's minus 3. You drop down 5 volts. Now what do you want to get back to? You want to get back to 0 volts. So what's the voltage drop have to be on R3? It has to be 4 volts. Because if you go up 12, you have to go down 12. Well, to go down 12, if you've already gone down 3, and you've already gone down 5, you need to go down 4 more to get a total voltage drop of 12. Does that make sense to everybody? 12 volts. So therefore, V3 must equal 4. Well, negative 4. Oops. Well, or you can say it's a 4 volt drop. If you put the black lead here and the red lead over here, it'll read negative 4 on your multimeter. Or if so if you put the black lead here and the red lead over here, if you switch them, it'll just read positive instead. But in other words, like if I'm going this, if I start at 0 down here, I would get a 4 volt jump, and then a 5 volt jump, and then a 3 volt jump, because everything up here is at 12 volts. So it's logical. It really doesn't make sense. Okay, you will also have a problem like this. If it takes 12 volts to push 3 amps of current through a circuit, what is the resistance of the circuit? So V equals 12 volts. 3 amps is current equals 3 amps. What are we trying to find? R. We're trying to find the resistance. And I want you to show it like this. And so what is Ohm's law? R equals V over I. You should memorize that. And so that's 12 volts divided by 3 amps. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And a volt per amp is an ohm. So 4 ohms. This is my answer. Now when I give you the quiz tomorrow, I expect you to show your work the way I did. Given, find, and solve with a variable, with the number with the unit. So you have to use variables, numbers, and units. You have to write down the formula, and you have to plug in your values with their units and give me the answer and put a box around it. Okay? So that's what you need to do. And we've answered all 3. Any questions? That is all.